I returned from a successful business trip to Phoenix, expecting warm homecoming, but discovered my belongings scattered across the driveway in torn garbage bags. My mother Linda stood with arms crossed alongside my siblings Jason and Amanda, all wearing expressions of cold determination. Linda's harsh words cut through the evening air. "You're 25 now, Simone. Time to stop living off us and get out." The shocking betrayal hit like a physical blow, but I maintained my composure, smiled mysteriously, slid into my Honda Civic, and drove into the darkness without looking back. 3 weeks earlier, while I was closing a major consulting deal in Phoenix, my family had been holding secret meetings about my so-called freeloading lifestyle. I had no idea that behind my back, they were plotting what they called an intervention. The irony wasn't lost on me now, as I checked into the downtown Marriott, using my business credit card to secure a luxury suite that cost more than most people made in a week. My brother, Jason, 23 and chronically unemployed, had convinced our mother that I was taking advantage of their generosity by living rent-free in the family home. What he didn't know was that I had been secretly covering his car payments for the past 8 months after he defaulted on his loan. Amanda, my 22-year-old sister who was drowning in student debt, felt resentful that I seemingly had no responsibilities while traveling for work. She was completely unaware that I had quietly paid off her $12,000 credit card debt just 6 months ago. Linda, our 52-year-old mother who had recently divorced my stepfather, believed she needed to practice tough love to help her eldest daughter become independent. The divorce had left her emotionally fragile and financially stretched, though she didn't realize how much I had been cushioning that blow. For the past 18 months, I had been making the mortgage payments through automatic transfers from my business account, something I had set up when she lost her administrative job at the insurance company. The family had grown increasingly resentful of my business trips, expensive clothes, and apparent lack of contribution to household expenses. They saw the designer suits I wore to client meetings and the first-class tickets my company paid for, but they never understood the nature of consulting work. They didn't see the 16-hour days, the constant pressure to deliver results, or the expertise I had built in crisis management that commanded premium rates. Linda had cleaned out my room with military precision, packing everything hastily into garbage bags without any consideration for my personal belongings. My grandmother's jewelry, my college diplomas, my professional wardrobe, everything thrown together like unwanted refuse. She had recruited Jason and Amanda to stand united in their decision, presenting a wall of family solidarity against me. They expected tears, begging, or explosive anger. Instead, my calm reaction had unsettled them completely. I could see the confusion in their faces as I smiled and walked away without protest. They had prepared for a dramatic confrontation, not dignified acceptance of their rejection. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that while they were staging their intervention based on jealousy and misunderstanding, I had been building something extraordinary. My consulting firm, which they dismissed as unpredictable freelance work, had been growing exponentially. The Phoenix trip they resented so much had resulted in a contract that would change everything. As I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward downtown, my phone buzzed with a call from my business partner, Marcus. His voice carried barely contained excitement as he delivered news that felt like cosmic justice. Our biggest client, Richardson Pharmaceuticals, wanted to offer us a $2 million contract for their European expansion project. The timing was perfect and terrible all at once. On the same day my family rejected me, the business world was embracing me completely. The hotel suite felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the evening. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, a stark contrast to the suburban house where I had been living like a guilty secret. I called my assistant Kelly and calmly rescheduled my meetings for the next day, my voice betraying none of the emotional turmoil churning inside me. That night, as I soaked in the marble bathtub and processed what had happened, I realized that my family had actually done me a favor. They had forced me to stop hiding my success, stop diminishing my achievements, and stop subsidizing their lives while they criticized mine. The pain was sharp, and immediate. But underneath it was something else entirely: freedom. For too long, I had been living small to make them comfortable with my success. I had downplayed my achievements, hidden my income, and continued to live in my childhood bedroom to maintain some illusion of family harmony. Their rejection hurt deeply, but it also liberated me from the exhausting pretense of being less than I was. The irony was devastating and perfect. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about independence, never knowing that I had been independently successful for years while they struggled with basic financial management. They wanted me to grow up and take responsibility, unaware that I had been taking responsibility not just for my own life but for theirs as well. As I drifted off to sleep in Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than Jason made in a month, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just rebuild my life without them. I would build it so magnificently that they would never be able to ignore what they had lost. The next morning brought clarity, along with the sunrise streaming through my suite windows. I had decisions to make, and for the first time in years, those decisions would be mine alone. No more considering family dynamics, no more hiding my success to avoid making others uncomfortable, no more living below my potential to maintain peace. My meeting with David Richardson, the pharmaceutical company president, took place in his corner office on the 40th floor of the Meridian building. Richardson was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who had built his company from a small biotech startup into a multinational corporation. He appreciated directness and innovation, qualities that had made our initial consulting relationship so successful. "Simone, ill-cut, straight to the point," he said, gesturing toward the leather chairs arranged around a polished conference table. "We want to expand into European markets within the next 18 months. We need someone who understands both crisis management and international business development. Based on your work with our domestic expansion, we believe you're exactly what we need." The contract terms were beyond what I had imagined possible. $2 million over 2 years, with performance bonuses that could push the total even higher. The position required immediate relocation to their New York headquarters, where I would lead a team of 12 specialists and report directly to Richardson himself. "I accept," I said without hesitation. The speed of my response surprised even me, but I knew this opportunity was exactly what I needed. Not just financially, but emotionally. I needed to be somewhere new, somewhere my achievements would be celebrated rather than resented. Within 2 weeks, I had transformed my entire existence. The luxury Manhattan apartment I leased was in a doorman building on the Upper East Side, with hardwood floors, a modern kitchen, and windows that overlooked Central Park. The monthly rent was more than my family's mortgage payment, but it represented something invaluable: complete independence. My new wardrobe reflected my elevated status. I worked with a personal shopper named Victoria Chen to select pieces that projected authority and sophistication. Tailored blazers from Brooks Brothers, silk blouses from high-end boutiques, and shoes that cost more than some people's car payments. Every piece was an investment in the image I wanted to project to the world. The social connections came naturally in my new environment. At a networking event for female executives, I met Catherine Mills, a corporate attorney who specialized in international mergers. Catherine was brilliant, successful, and refreshingly direct about the challenges women faced in climbing corporate ladders. We bonded over shared experiences of having our competence questioned and our achievements minimized. The key, Catherine told me over dinner at an exclusive restaurant in Midtown, is to never apologize for your success. Own it completely, or others will always try to diminish it. Her words resonated deeply, given what I had just experienced with my own family. I also formed a friendship with Rebecca Torres, an entrepreneur who had built a successful marketing firm from nothing. Rebecca understood the isolation that could come with rapid success, especially when it outpaced the understanding of family and old friends. She became both a mentor and a confidant as I navigated my new life. My strategy regarding my family was deliberate and calculated. I changed my phone number, removed myself from all social media platforms, and instructed my assistant to screen any calls that might come through my business line. I wasn't hiding exactly, but I also wasn't making myself available for contact. If they wanted to find me, they would have to work for it. The silence was intentional psychological warfare. I wanted them to wonder where I was, what I was doing, whether I was okay. I wanted them to experience the uncertainty and worry that came with losing someone important. Most of all, I wanted them to have time to realize what they had lost before it was too late to matter. 3 months after leaving home, everything changed again. Marcus called me with news that would cement my transformation from family disappointment to industry leader. Our consulting firm had been selected for the Business Excellence Award, the most prestigious recognition in our field. The nomination cited our innovative approach to crisis management and our success in helping companies navigate complex international expansions. Simone, they want to feature your personal story, Marcus explained. The committee was particularly impressed by your resilience in overcoming personal adversity to achieve professional excellence. They want to interview you about your journey for Business Today magazine. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. My family had rejected me for my apparent lack of success, and now that same perceived failure was being celebrated as a triumph story in the most widely read business publication in the country. The article would include professional photographs, detailed interviews about my methodologies, and a feature about my rise from personal setback to corporate achievement. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my family's intervention had inadvertently created exactly the narrative that made my success story so compelling. Without their rejection, I would never have had the dramatic personal struggle that made my professional achievements newsworthy. They had unwittingly provided the catalyst for my transformation from hidden success to public recognition. The thought of them discovering my achievements through a magazine article rather than personal contact was both satisfying and slightly sad. But I had learned something valuable in my months of independence. I didn't need their approval to validate my worth. Their opinion of my success mattered far less than I had previously believed. While I was building my empire in Manhattan, the foundation of my family's life was crumbling in ways they were only beginning to understand. Linda sat at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, staring at a stack of bills that seemed to grow larger every day. The mortgage statement showed 2 missed payments, and the late fees were accumulating faster than she could calculate. For months, she had assumed the automatic payments were coming from her savings account. She had never questioned the steady deductions because the amounts seemed reasonable and the payments were always on time. Now, faced with bounced payment notices and penalty fees, she was forced to investigate the source of those mysterious transfers. The bank representative, a young woman named Sarah, who spoke with professional sympathy, explained the situation with devastating clarity. Mrs. Henderson, the payments were being made from an external business account. The account holder stopped the transfers in February, and since your savings account only had $300, the subsequent payments bounced. What business account? Linda asked, though she was beginning to suspect an answer she didn't want to hear. Simone Consulting, LLC. Sarah replied, consulting her computer screen. The transfers had been coming from that account for approximately 18 months. Linda felt the blood drain from her face as the full scope of her mistake became clear. While she had been criticizing Simone for not contributing to household expenses, her daughter had actually been paying the most significant bill they had. Without those payments, foreclosure wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Jason was facing his own cascade of failures. His part-time job at the courier service ended abruptly when he was fired for chronic tardiness and unreliable performance. His supervisor, a no-nonsense man named Pete Williams, had given him multiple warnings about his attitude and work ethic before finally losing patience. Look, kid, I've tried to work with you, but this isn't going to improve, Pete had said during their final conversation. You show up late, you complain about every assignment, and you act like we owe you something. Find somewhere else to work. Without steady income, Jason couldn't afford his apartment and was forced to move back into Simona's former room. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now occupying the space that had been the catalyst for their family crisis. His girlfriend, Madison, a nursing student who had been increasingly frustrated with his lack of direction, ended their relationship with brutal honesty. "Jason, I need to focus on my career and my future," she told him over coffee at their usual spot. "You're 23 years old and you still act like a teenager. I can't build a life with someone who doesn't take responsibility for anything." Amanda was struggling with a different set of challenges. Her student loan payments had increased as she entered her senior year, and without Simona's secret assistance, she couldn't manage her monthly expenses. She took a second job at a coffee shop near campus, working early morning shifts before classes and evening shifts after her internship at the social services office. The exhaustion was affecting everything. Her grades slipped from A's to C's as she struggled to balance work, school, and mounting financial pressure. Her academic advisor, Professor Janet Morrison, expressed concern about her declining performance during a private meeting. "Amanda, your work has always been exceptional, but this semester you seem overwhelmed," Professor Morrison observed. "Is there something going on that's affecting your ability to focus on your studies?" Amanda couldn't bring herself to admit that her family's financial crisis was destroying her academic performance. Instead, she mumbled vague explanations about increased work responsibilities and personal stress, knowing that the real problem was much deeper than she could reveal. Linda's investigation into the family's financial history revealed the devastating truth about Simona's contributions. Bank statements showed regular transfers for mortgage payments, as well as several large payments that corresponded exactly to Jason's car loan and Amanda's credit card debt. The evidence was irrefutable. Simone had been the primary financial support for the family while they accused her of being irresponsible. The guilt was overwhelming. Linda spent sleepless nights reviewing every conversation, every criticism, every assumption she had made about her eldest daughter. The woman she had accused of freeloading had actually been subsidizing their entire lifestyle while building her own successful business. Her attempts to contact Simone began with tentative calls to her old number, only to discover that it had been disconnected. She tried reaching out to Simona's former colleagues at her previous job, but learned that she had left for a prestigious position in New York months ago. Every avenue of contact led to dead ends. Linda created fake social media profiles, hoping to locate Simone through mutual friends or business connections. She spent hours scrolling through LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, searching for any trace of her daughter's current life. The complete absence of information was both frustrating and telling. Simone had effectively vanished from their world entirely. The financial pressure intensified daily. Utility bills arrived with disconnect notices, credit card payments were missed, and the home maintenance that had been deferred for months became impossible to ignore. The roof leaked during spring rains, the fence that Jason had damaged with his car remained unrepaired, and the landscaping grew wild because they couldn't afford professional care. Neighbors and family friends began asking uncomfortable questions about Simone's absence. Linda created vague explanations about her daughter pursuing opportunities in other cities, but the truth became harder to hide as their financial struggles became visible through their deteriorating property and obvious stress. The breaking point came on a Thursday morning when Linda found an official foreclosure notice taped to their front door. The legal document spelled out the timeline for losing their home in cold, bureaucratic language that made the crisis undeniably real. She had 60 days to bring the mortgage current or face eviction from the house where she had raised her children. The bank representative who delivered the final notice was a different person this time, an older man named Robert Chen, who spoke with the weary authority of someone who had handled countless foreclosures. He mentioned, almost casually, that the previous payments had come from a business account belonging to Simone Consulting LLC. "Mom, I don't know your personal situation, but that account was making substantial payments on your behalf for quite some time," he said, his tone suggesting he had seen this story before. "If there's any possibility of re-establishing that arrangement, I'd encourage you to pursue it quickly." Linda stared at the foreclosure papers long after Robert had driven away. The house that had been their family sanctuary was about to be lost because she had driven away the one person who had been protecting it. The irony was so cruel, it felt almost intentional, like the universe was delivering a perfectly crafted lesson about gratitude and perception. That evening, as she sat surrounded by bills she couldn't pay and notices she couldn't satisfy, Linda finally understood the magnitude of what they had done. They hadn't just rejected Simone. They had destroyed their own security in the process. And somewhere in New York City, the daughter they had dismissed as irresponsible was probably living a life of success they couldn't even imagine. The Plaza Hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the quiet elegance that comes with old money and established power. 300 of the most influential executives in American business had gathered for the annual Business Excellence Awards ceremony, and I stood backstage adjusting the diamond necklace that Alexander had given me for my 26th birthday. Alexander Hayes was everything my family would never have imagined for me. An architectural firm principal who designed sustainable buildings for Fortune 500 companies. He was brilliant without being arrogant, successful without being ostentatious, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and ambitions. We had met at a charity gala for environmental causes 6 months earlier, and our relationship had developed with the kind of natural ease that I had never experienced before. "You look stunning," he murmured, adjusting his black tie as we prepared for my entrance. "But more than that, you look like someone who belongs exactly where she is." The acceptance speech I had prepared was deeply personal without being vengeful. I spoke about the journey from personal betrayal to professional triumph, about learning to value your own worth regardless of others' opinions, and about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who celebrate rather than diminish your achievements. Success isn't just about individual accomplishment, I told the audience, my voice carrying clearly through the acoustically perfect ballroom. It's about having the courage to pursue your potential, even when the people closest to you don't understand your vision. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the motivation to prove them wrong. The standing ovation lasted almost 2 minutes. David Richardson, seated at the head table with other industry leaders, smiled with obvious pride as photographers captured the moment. The Business Excellence Award itself was a work of art, a crystal sculpture that would look perfect on the mantel of my Park Avenue office. The Business Today magazine article had been released that morning, hitting newsstands across the country with my photograph on the cover. The headline read, "From Family Rejection to Executive Success, How One Woman Turned Betrayal into Triumph." The 6-page feature detailed my journey from suburban obscurity to corporate leadership, focusing on the resilience and innovation that had driven my meteoric rise. The journalist, Margaret Foster, had conducted 3 extensive interviews over the past month. She was particularly interested in the psychological aspects of my transformation, the way personal adversity had crystallized my professional focus and clarified my priorities. "What strikes me most about your story," Margaret had said during our final interview, "is how you used rejection as motivation, rather than allowing it to become limitation. That's a rare quality in any field, but particularly in business where setbacks can be career-ending." The magazine feature carefully protected my family's privacy while telling my story completely. No names were mentioned, no specific locations identified, but the emotional journey was laid out in compelling detail. Readers could understand the pain of family betrayal without knowing the specific individuals involved. My bank account reflected the dramatic change in my circumstances. The Richardson Pharmaceuticals contract had been even more lucrative than originally projected, leading to additional opportunities with international corporations seeking similar expertise. My personal wealth had grown exponentially, allowing me to purchase the penthouse apartment I had been leasing and invest in a portfolio of stocks and real estate that would ensure long-term financial security. The penthouse overlooked Central Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. The modern kitchen featured top-of-the-line appliances that I actually knew how to use, thanks to cooking classes I had taken with Catherine Mills. The master suite was larger than the entire downstairs of my childhood home, with a walk-in closet that could house my growing collection of designer clothes and accessories. More important than the material success was the personal growth I had experienced through therapy with Dr. Patricia Wong, a renowned psychologist who specialized in helping high-achieving women navigate complex family dynamics. Dr. Wong had helped me understand that my family's rejection wasn't a reflection of my worth, but rather a projection of their own insecurities and limitations. Families often struggle when one member achieves success that surpasses their understanding. Dr. Wong had explained during one of our weekly sessions, "Your achievements threatened their self-concept in ways they couldn't articulate, so they created a narrative that made your success seem undeserved or problematic." Through therapy, I learned to value myself independently of family approval and to build genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. My circle of friends now included accomplished professionals who understood the demands and rewards of building something meaningful from nothing. The charity work I had begun with Alexander's encouragement provided additional fulfillment and perspective. We volunteered together at a financial literacy program for young women aging out of the foster care system, teaching them skills that would help them avoid the kind of economic dependency that trapped so many people in dysfunctional relationships. Working with those young women reminded me how fortunate I was to have developed independence and financial savvy at a relatively young age. Their struggles put my family situation into perspective and reinforced my commitment to never again compromise my autonomy for the comfort of others. The speaking invitation that changed everything came from my alma mater, State University. The dean of the business school, Dr. Michael Torres, wanted me to deliver the keynote address at their annual alumni dinner. The event would be covered by local news stations and business publications, representing my first major public appearance since achieving national recognition. "Simone, your story embodies everything we hope our graduates will achieve," Dr. Torres had said during our phone conversation. "Your combination of academic excellence, professional innovation, and personal resilience makes you exactly the kind of role model our current students need to see." I accepted the invitation, knowing that the public appearance might lead my family to discover my success. After months of silence and separation, I realized I was finally ready to face whatever consequences might arise from their recognition of what they had lost. The scared, accommodating young woman who had lived in their house was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own value and wouldn't accept treatment that diminished it. As I prepared for bed that night in my luxurious apartment, surrounded by evidence of everything I had accomplished, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with material possessions. I had proven to myself that I could build a life of meaning and achievement without compromising my principles or accepting disrespect from anyone, including family members who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. The foreclosure notice had been posted on the front door for 3 days when Amanda finally spotted the Business Today magazine in Dr. Patterson's waiting room. She had been there for a stress-induced migraine, one of many that had plagued her since their financial situation became desperate. The woman on the cover looked familiar, but it took several minutes for recognition to dawn. The sophisticated professional in the tailored Armani suit, standing confidently in what appeared to be a corner office with Manhattan skyline views, was unmistakably her sister. Amanda's hands trembled as she opened to the feature article, reading with growing horror as the story unfolded. From family rejection to executive success, how one woman turned betrayal into triumph. The subtitle made Amanda's stomach clench with dread. The article detailed a journey that was painfully familiar, describing a successful businesswoman who had been supporting her family financially while they criticized her supposed lack of contribution. The piece quoted the unnamed protagonist extensively. "They saw my business trips as vacations and my professional wardrobe as vanity. They never understood that I was working 16-hour days to build something meaningful, while also ensuring their financial security. When they told me to leave, I realized they valued their misconceptions more than my actual contributions." Amanda raced home with the magazine, her heart pounding as she burst through the front door. "Mom! Jason!" "You need to see this right now," she called, her voice cracking with panic and recognition. Linda emerged from the kitchen, where she had been reviewing bankruptcy paperwork, her face drawn with exhaustion and stress. Jason appeared from the living room, looking up from the unemployment application he had been completing on his laptop. "It's Simone," Amanda gasped, spreading the magazine open on the dining room table. "She's on the cover of Business Today. She's famous." The three family members huddled around the magazine, reading in stunned silence as their worst fears were confirmed. The article painted a picture of a highly successful executive who had overcome family betrayal to achieve extraordinary professional recognition. While no names were mentioned, the details were unmistakably their story told from Simone's perspective. "She was paying our mortgage," Linda whispered, her voice barely audible as the implications sank in. "For 18 months, she was secretly paying our mortgage while we accused her of being irresponsible." Jason stared at a photograph of Simone accepting an award, surrounded by executives in expensive suits. She looked polished, confident, and completely transformed from the sister he remembered. "We kicked out someone who was supporting us," he said, the words hanging in the air like an accusation. The article's description of the family's intervention matched their memories perfectly, but from a completely different perspective. Where they had seen tough love and necessary boundaries, Simone had experienced rejection and betrayal. Where they had assumed freeloading and irresponsibility, she had been demonstrating generosity and financial acumen that far exceeded their own. Linda's breakdown was complete and devastating. She sobbed over the magazine, overwhelmed by guilt and the realization of how profoundly they had misjudged their daughter. The woman they had dismissed as a burden was actually an industry leader whose success story was being celebrated in the most prestigious business publication in the country. "We have to find her," Linda said, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. "We have to apologize and explain that we didn't understand." Their attempts to locate Simone began immediately, but proved futile from the start. Linda tried calling her old number repeatedly, leaving voicemails on a disconnected line that would never be retrieved. She called Simone's former employer, only to learn that she had left months ago for a senior position with a pharmaceutical company in New York. Amanda created social media accounts specifically to search for any trace of their sister online. Hours of investigation yielded nothing useful. Simone had either never had significant social media presence or had scrubbed it completely when she relocated. LinkedIn showed a basic profile for Simone Consulting LLC, but no personal information or contact details. Jason suggested they hire a private investigator, a decision that depleted what little remained of their emergency savings. Thomas Burke was a former police detective who specialized in locating missing persons, though he made it clear that Simone wasn't technically missing so much as deliberately avoiding contact. "Your sister has clearly chosen to remove herself from your lives," Burke explained during their initial consultation. "She's not hiding exactly, but she's not making herself available for contact either. That's her legal right, and it suggests she has reasons for maintaining distance." Burke's investigation revealed the extent of Simone's transformation. She had legally changed her name to Simone Richardson after marrying Alexander Hayes, an accomplished architect, in a private ceremony 6 months earlier. The wedding had been featured in the society pages of several New York publications, showing the couple at exclusive venues surrounded by successful professionals. "She's living in a different world now," Burke reported to the family. "Penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, membership in exclusive clubs, charity work with prominent organizations. She's not just successful, she's become part of New York's professional elite." The photographs Burke provided showed a woman who bore little resemblance to the daughter and sister they remembered. Simone's hair was styled by expensive professionals, her clothes were clearly custom-made, and her bearing projected confidence and authority that suggested years of success and recognition. Linda's emotional descent accelerated as the reality of their situation became undeniable. In one frantic evening, she sent 60 messages through various platforms and communication methods. Text messages to disconnected numbers, emails to outdated accounts, Facebook messages to profiles that hadn't been active in months. LinkedIn connection requests that went unanswered. The messages revealed her growing desperation and panic. "Simone, please call us. We made a terrible mistake. The house is in foreclosure. We need to talk. Please forgive us. Where are you? We're sorry. Come home." The progression showed a woman slowly realizing that her actions had consequences she hadn't anticipated. Jason and Amanda decided to travel to New York City, using credit cards they couldn't afford to charge for train tickets and a cheap hotel room. Their plan was to wait outside Simona's office building until they could intercept her. But the security measures in Manhattan's financial district proved more sophisticated than they had anticipated. The Richardson Pharmaceuticals building required keycard access beyond the lobby, and security guards prevented unauthorized individuals from accessing the executive floors. They spent 2 days waiting outside various entrances, but the building had multiple exits and underground parking that made their surveillance efforts pointless. Their presence didn't go unnoticed. Building security eventually approached them, and after a brief conversation, it became clear that they were not welcome to loiter on private property. The security supervisor, a professional woman named Maria Santos, was polite but firm in her directive. "I understand you're trying to contact someone, but this isn't the appropriate method," Maria explained. "If you have legitimate business with any of our tenants, you need to schedule appointments through proper channels." The family returned home defeated and more desperate than before. Burke's final report delivered the most devastating news of all. Simone had specifically instructed her attorney to monitor for any attempts at contact from her family of origin. She was aware of their efforts to locate her, but had chosen not to respond. "She knows you've been trying to reach her," Burke explained gently. "She's made a conscious decision to maintain the separation. That doesn't mean it's permanent, but it does mean she's not ready for reconciliation on your terms." As Linda stared at the foreclosure papers and unpaid bills scattered across her kitchen table, she finally understood the complete scope of what they had lost. They hadn't just rejected a daughter and sister. They had destroyed their own security and missed the opportunity to be part of an extraordinary success story that was now being celebrated by strangers while they faced financial ruin alone. The certified letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a postal worker who required Linda's signature and photo identification. The envelope bore the letterhead of Morrison, Chen and Associates, a Manhattan law firm that specialized in high-net-worth family disputes. Linda's hands shook as she opened the formal document, immediately recognizing the precise legal language that indicated serious business. "Dear Mrs. Henderson," the letter began. "We represent Mrs. Simone Richardson, formerly Simone Henderson, in matters concerning her relationship with her family of origin. Mrs. Richardson has become aware of your recent attempts to contact her and has asked us to facilitate communication regarding your current financial difficulties and the pending foreclosure of your residence." The letter continued with devastating formality. "Our client wishes to clarify certain matters concerning her previous financial contributions to your household, which appear to have been misunderstood during your last interaction. She is prepared to meet with you to discuss these matters, provided that such meeting occurs under controlled circumstances with legal representation present." Linda called Amanda and Jason immediately, her voice trembling as she read the letter aloud. The formality of the communication was chilling, suggesting that their sister no longer viewed them as family but rather as a legal problem requiring professional management. "She knows about the foreclosure," Amanda said, her voice hollow with realization. "She knows we're about to lose the house, and she's handling it through lawyers instead of just calling us." The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday at the Morrison, Chen and Associates offices in Midtown Manhattan. Linda, Jason, and Amanda rode the train in uncomfortable silence, each processing the magnitude of what they were about to face. The woman they were meeting was no longer their daughter and sister, but rather a successful executive who required legal protection from her own family. The law office occupied 3 floors of a prestigious building, with marble floors, original artwork, and the kind of understated luxury that suggested extremely expensive hourly rates. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s, directed them to a conference room, where they waited nervously for 20 minutes before Simone arrived. The woman who entered the room was both familiar and completely transformed. Simone wore a navy blue Chanel suit with pearls and low heels that added authority to her already commanding presence. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup was subtle but perfect, and her bearing projected confidence that had been completely absent during their last encounter. She was accompanied by her attorney, Margaret Chen, a sharp-eyed woman who specialized in protecting high-net-worth individuals from family exploitation. Margaret carried a thick folder of documents and a legal pad covered with notes that suggested extensive preparation for this confrontation. "Hello, Linda, Jason, Amanda," Simone said, her voice coolly professional as she took a seat across the polished conference table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet under these circumstances. I believe we have several matters to clarify." Margaret opened the folder and began presenting documentation that laid out the financial relationship between Simone and her family with devastating clarity. Bank records showed 18 months of mortgage payments, totaling $42,000. Credit card payments for Amanda's debt totaling $12,000. Car payments for Jason totaling $8,000 during the period in question. Margaret explained, "My client provided approximately $78,000 in direct financial support to your household while maintaining her own residence and building her consulting business. This support was provided voluntarily and without formal agreement, though it appears to have been essential to your family's financial stability." The documentation was irrefutable and humiliating. While they had been criticizing Simone for not contributing to household expenses, she had actually been subsidizing their entire lifestyle to the tune of nearly $80,000. The evidence made their accusations of freeloading seem not just wrong, but cruelly absurd. Linda broke down completely, sobbing as she faced the magnitude of their mistake. "Simone, we didn't know," she cried. "We thought you were just living with us rent-free while you traveled. We never realized you were supporting us. You never asked." Simone replied, her voice remaining calm and controlled. "You made assumptions based on appearances and let those assumptions guide your actions. You saw my business trips as vacations and my professional clothes as vanity. You never bothered to understand what I was actually doing or how I was contributing to our family." Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair, finally speaking for the first time since they had arrived. "I encouraged Mom to kick you out," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I was jealous of your success and convinced everyone that you were taking advantage of us. I was wrong about everything." Amanda nodded miserably. "I resented you because I thought you didn't have any responsibilities while I was struggling with school and debt. I didn't know you had paid off my credit cards. I didn't understand that you were helping all of us while we criticized you." Margaret consulted her notes before continuing with the next phase of revelations. "My client has also become aware that you have been attempting to locate her for several months. She wants you to understand that this separation was not impulsive, but rather a calculated decision based on your treatment of her. I hired a private investigator." Linda confessed. "I sent dozens of messages to old numbers and email addresses. We even traveled to New York trying to find your office building. We were desperate." "The desperation," Simone said quietly, "came only after you realized the financial consequences of your actions, not from missing me as a person or regretting the emotional harm you caused, but from needing the money I had been providing." The accuracy of that observation was like a physical blow. Their attempts to reconcile had indeed been motivated primarily by financial crisis rather than genuine remorse for their treatment of her. The timing of their search efforts, beginning only after the foreclosure notice arrived, proved that their priorities had been tragically misplaced. Margaret presented the final document, a formal agreement that outlined potential terms for limited future contact. The language was precise and unforgiving, establishing clear boundaries and expectations for any relationship moving forward. "My client is prepared to provide a one-time financial intervention to prevent the foreclosure of your home," Margaret explained. "However, this assistance comes with specific conditions. First, It will be structured as a business loan with market rate interest and formal repayment terms. Second, any future contact must be scheduled through this office and conducted with professional mediation. Third, my client reserves the right to terminate all contact permanently if these boundaries are violated. The offer was both generous and devastating. Simone was willing to save their home, but only through a formal business arrangement that emphasized how completely their relationship had changed. They were no longer family in any meaningful sense, but rather creditors and debtors bound by legal obligation rather than love. "Why?" Linda asked through her tears. "After everything we did to you, why would you help us at all?" Simone was quiet for a long moment, her composed facade revealing the first crack of genuine emotion since entering the room. "Because losing your home won't teach you the lesson you need to learn," she said finally. "It will only make you victims in your own narrative. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, but I also want you to have the opportunity to rebuild your lives with better judgment and genuine appreciation for what you had." The meeting concluded with signed agreements and wire transfer instructions that would prevent the foreclosure while establishing a formal debt relationship between them. As they prepared to leave, Simone stood and faced her family for what might be the final time. "I hope you use this second chance to build something better than what you had before," she said. "I hope you learn to recognize value before you lose it, and to treat people based on their actual contributions rather than your assumptions about their worth." As the family rode the train back to their suburban town, they sat in stunned silence, processing the enormity of what had just occurred. They had been saved from foreclosure, but they had also been formally estranged from a daughter and sister who had achieved extraordinary success without them. The price of their judgmental assumptions had been the loss of someone they should have celebrated rather than criticized. 6 months had passed since our meeting in the conference room, and I found myself reflecting on the complex emotions that came with achieving both professional success and personal justice. My life in Manhattan had settled into a rhythm that felt natural and sustainable. The penthouse apartment had become a true home, filled with art that Alexander and I had selected together and furniture that reflected our shared aesthetic preferences. The Richardson Pharmaceuticals' European expansion had exceeded all projections, resulting in a bonus that pushed my annual income into 8 figures. More importantly, the success had established my consulting firm as a leader in international business development, attracting clients from industries I had never imagined working with. Tech companies, entertainment conglomerates, and financial services firms all sought our expertise in navigating complex market expansions. Alexander and I had married in a small ceremony at the Botanical Garden in Brooklyn, surrounded by friends who understood the value of building relationships based on mutual respect and shared goals. Catherine Mills had been my maid of honor, while Rebecca Torres handled the photography with artistic skill that rivaled professional wedding photographers. The celebration was intimate but elegant, reflecting our preference for substance over spectacle. My therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Wong had evolved from crisis management to maintenance of emotional health. We met monthly now, focusing on strategies for maintaining boundaries while remaining open to genuine connection with new people who proved themselves worthy of trust. "You've achieved something remarkable, Doctor," Wong observed during our most recent session. "You've learned to separate your self-worth from others' opinions while maintaining the capacity for meaningful relationships. That balance is incredibly difficult for most people to achieve." The speaking engagements had multiplied beyond what I could reasonably accept. Universities, professional organizations, and women's leadership groups all wanted to hear my story of transformation and triumph. I was selective about accepting invitations, choosing opportunities that aligned with my values and provided genuine value to audiences who could benefit from my experiences. My family had honored the terms of our agreement with surprising consistency. The loan payments arrived on schedule each month, accompanied by brief updates about their progress toward financial independence. Linda had enrolled in a financial management course at the community college and secured part-time employment at a credit union where her organizational skills were valued and appropriately compensated. Jason had finally found stable employment with a logistics company, starting in an entry-level position but demonstrating the work ethic and reliability that had been absent during his previous jobs. His supervisor, according to the updates I received, appreciated his willingness to learn and his improved attitude toward professional responsibilities. Amanda had graduated with honors despite the financial stress she had endured during her final year. She secured a position with a nonprofit organization focused on housing assistance, work that seemed to provide personal fulfillment as well as professional growth. Her experience with near homelessness had apparently given her genuine empathy for families facing similar crises. The updates came through Margaret Chen's office, maintaining the professional distance that protected both my emotional well-being and their understanding that our relationship had fundamentally changed. I read their progress reports with genuine satisfaction, not because I needed their success to validate my own worth, but because their growth suggested they had learned valuable lessons from our shared crisis. My charitable work had expanded to include financial literacy programs for young women transitioning from foster care to independent living. Working with these remarkable young women reminded me daily of my own resilience and the importance of economic independence for personal freedom. Many of them had survived family situations far more traumatic than my own, yet they approached their futures with determination that inspired me to continue investing in programs that provided practical skills and emotional support. The Business Excellence Award had led to board positions with 2 nonprofit organizations focused on economic empowerment for women. The work was both professionally satisfying and personally meaningful, allowing me to use my business expertise for causes that aligned with my values and experiences. Alexander and I had purchased a weekend house in the Hamptons, a restored Victorian cottage where we hosted dinner parties for friends and colleagues who shared our interests in architecture, sustainable development, and social justice issues. The gatherings were intellectually stimulating and emotionally nourishing, creating the kind of chosen family that I had learned to value more than biological connections based solely on shared genetics. My relationship with my birth family remained cordial but distant. I had received a formal apology letter from Linda through our attorneys, acknowledging the specific ways they had misjudged my contributions and expressing genuine remorse for the pain their assumptions had caused. The letter demonstrated emotional growth that I respected, even though it couldn't undo the fundamental breach of trust that had led to our estrangement. Jason had sent a separate letter taking full responsibility for his role in encouraging their intervention. His acknowledgement of his jealousy and his commitment to personal improvement suggested maturity that had been absent during our childhood interactions. I hoped his growth was genuine and sustainable, both for his own sake and for the sake of any future family he might build. Amanda's letter was the most difficult to read because it revealed how deeply their financial stress had affected her academic performance and future prospects. Her graduation with honors despite those challenges demonstrated resilience that I admired, and her choice to work in housing assistance suggested she had developed genuine empathy for families facing economic instability. The life lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was both simple and profound. Assumptions can destroy relationships that might otherwise flourish with better communication and mutual respect. My family had assumed I was irresponsible because they didn't understand the nature of my work or the extent of my contributions. I had assumed they would eventually recognize my value without requiring me to explicitly demonstrate my worth. Both sets of assumptions had prevented honest conversations that might have avoided the entire crisis. If they had asked about my business instead of judging it, they would have learned about my success. If I had shared my financial contributions instead of hiding them, they would have understood my commitment to our family's well-being. The deeper lesson involved the importance of surrounding yourself with people who celebrate rather than diminish your achievements. True family, whether biological or chosen, should provide support and encouragement for your growth rather than criticism and resentment for your success. The people in my current life understood this principle instinctively, creating relationships built on mutual empowerment rather than competition or insecurity. Looking back on the evening when I found my belongings in garbage bags, I could see how that moment of rejection had actually been a gift disguised as betrayal. Their assumption that I needed them more than they needed me had freed me to discover my own strength and build a life that reflected my actual worth rather than their limited perception of my potential. The financial independence I had achieved was important, but the emotional independence was transformative. Learning to value myself, regardless of others' approval, had opened possibilities I never could have imagined while living small to make others comfortable with my success. My story had become a testament to the possibility of turning personal adversity into professional triumph while maintaining integrity and compassion. The success I had achieved felt earned rather than lucky, sustainable rather than fragile, and meaningful rather than merely material. As I finished writing this account, sitting in my home office overlooking Central Park with my husband reading architectural journals nearby and my consulting business thriving beyond my wildest dreams, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving anyone wrong and everything to do with living authentically. The woman who had been rejected by her family for apparent irresponsibility had become an industry leader whose expertise was sought by global corporations. The daughter who had been accused of freeloading had built wealth that ensured security for herself and her chosen family. The sister, who had been dismissed as unsuccessful, had achieved recognition that would last long beyond any temporary family drama. Most importantly, I had learned that true success isn't measured by others' recognition of your achievements, but by your own understanding of your worth and your commitment to living in alignment with your values. The people who matter will celebrate your growth, while those who diminish your achievements reveal more about their own limitations than about your actual value. If you've experienced family rejection or had your contributions undervalued by people who should support you, I hope my story provides evidence that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Build your own definition of success. Surround yourself with people who celebrate rather than criticize your achievements. And never compromise your potential to make others comfortable with their own limitations. Your life has value that exists independently of anyone else's opinion, and sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong while building something beautiful in the process. Have you ever had your contributions undervalued by people who should have supported you instead? I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and how you've learned to value yourself independently of others' opinions. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with your own experiences, I'd be grateful if you'd like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with more stories about resilience and triumph, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' recognition of their achievements. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to embrace your own potential regardless of who believes in you along the way.